My husband, the CEO of our company, suddenly brought me a lovingly prepared breakfast, an act of attention so unusual it was immediately jarring. But I was in the throes of a vicious bout of morning sickness, so I passed the food to his personal assistant. An hour later, a blood-curdling scream echoed through the entire office floor. I ran to see what was wrong and froze in place. That morning, I had arrived at the office early, as usual. The morning sun streamed through the panoramic windows, illuminating the thick binders of reports on my mahogany desk. I had just sat down, intending to review a few financial statements, when my office door swung open. It was Michael, holding a sleek, pale blue insulated container, a high-end model I'd never seen in our kitchen. What was more surprising was his smile, a brilliant, warm, and strangely humble expression I hadn't seen in a very long time. He set the container on my desk with a soft thud. "Good morning, Kate. Happy 3rd anniversary. I wanted to do something special for you." I stared at him, stunned, my gaze dropping to the container. Michael Anderson, a man constantly buried in endless meetings and frequent business trips, had cooked breakfast for his wife. He explained gently as he opened the lid. "You've been looking pale lately. I know work has been stressful, so I woke up at the crack of dawn to make you my special spicy chorizo and pepper jack breakfast skillet. It's your favorite comfort food. Eat it before it gets cold." A thick steam rose, and the distinct, pungent aroma of the chorizo, a heavy mix of smoked spices, garlic, and greasy sausage, filled the air. 6 months ago, the old Catherine might have shed tears of joy at this rare display of affection. But ironically, at that moment, the smell was my worst nightmare. I was secretly 3 months pregnant, and morning sickness had been tormenting me mercilessly. Any strong or savory smell sent my stomach into spasms, a wave of nausea rising to my throat. I held my breath, swallowed hard, and forced a smile. "Thank you, Michael. That's so thoughtful. But I actually just had some toast at home. I'm still really full." Michael looked taken aback for a second. The smile on his lips tightened before he quickly regained his usual composure. He pushed the container toward me, his tone insistent. "Toast is nothing. Have some of this, it'll give you energy. I spent all morning prepping and cooking this. Don't do this to me." His words were soft, but they carried an invisible pressure. I tried to find a spark of sincerity in his eyes, but saw only a calculated expectation. Just as I was scrambling for a way to refuse without offending him, a knock on the door saved me. It was Jessica Miller, the new personal assistant hired 3 months ago, holding a stack of documents. She wore a tight pencil skirt that accentuated her figure, and her meticulously made-up face radiated a mixture of seduction and ambition. She placed the files on my desk, shot Michael a flirtatious glance, and then, noticing the breakfast skillet, cooed in a honey-sweet voice. "Oh, Mr. Anderson, you are just the sweetest man. Taking care of Miss Pierce like this so early in the morning. She's so lucky. Miss Pierce, with a perfect husband like him, you must be the envy of every woman in the world." Michael completely ignored her, gave me a few last-minute instructions, and left the office. In that instant, an idea struck me. I smiled and gently pushed the container toward her. My voice held a note of sarcasm that, at the time, probably no one noticed. "I'm just too full from breakfast, and it's a shame to let Michael's effort go to waste. Jessica, have you had breakfast yet? If not, please have this for me. The chorizo skillet Michael makes is absolutely delicious. It's still steaming hot." Jessica's eyes widened in surprise, then transformed into a look of pure ecstasy, as if she'd just won the lottery. She glanced at the door Michael had just exited, confirming there was no objection. Seeing his silent, slightly annoyed acquiescence, she snatched the container with enthusiasm. Her voice was syrupy sweet. "Well, if you insist, thank you so much, Miss Pierce. I'll eat every last bite. Anything the CEO makes must be a gift from the heavens." I watched Jessica leave my office, clutching the container like a precious treasure, and felt a wave of relief wash over me, having narrowly escaped a bout of violent nausea. I tried to focus on my work, turning the pages of the financial report, but the numbers danced before my eyes and my head spun. A sense of dread grew inside me, heavy and dark like the sky before a storm. I poured a glass of lukewarm water and sipped it slowly, trying to calm the tiny life stirring inside me. After 3 years of waiting, my prayers had finally been answered and granted me this little miracle. I promised myself I would take good care of my health and not let any negative thoughts affect my child. About an hour later, as I was engrossed in typing, I heard a loud thud from the open-plan workspace, like something heavy crashing to the floor. Immediately after, a blood-curdling scream tore through the silence of the entire floor. It wasn't a cry of ordinary fear, but a shriek of extreme, sharp, and agonizing pain. My heart seized. A terrible premonition washed over me. I shot up from my chair and rushed out of my office. The scene that greeted me made me freeze on the spot. Jessica was writhing on the floor next to her desk. The breakfast container was overturned, its contents splattered everywhere. The pungent smell of the spiced sausage mixed with the acrid stench of vomit, creating an unbearable odor. Jessica was clutching her stomach, her beautiful face now contorted in pain, pale and bloodless. Her eyes were rolling back, she was foaming at the mouth, and her body was convulsing uncontrollably, like a seizure. But what terrified me the most was that the lower part of her beige dress was slowly being stained a deep, spreading crimson. It was blood. Fresh blood, flowing freely, soaking into the office carpet. The office staff descended into panic, running around in chaos. Screams and shouts to call 911 filled the air. I stood rooted to the spot, my hands and legs trembling. A lump forming in my throat. What on earth was happening? Why was Jessica like this? It was because of the breakfast skillet. The food I gave her. The thought shot through my mind like a bolt of lightning, sending a chill down my spine. At that very moment, the door to the CEO's office flew open. Michael rushed out, his face a mask of panic I had never seen before. He didn't run to help his employee, nor did he ask what was happening. He stopped a few feet away, his eyes wide, fixed on the growing pool of blood on the floor. I watched, clear as day, as his expression morphed from shock to horror, and finally, to a crazed fury. He snapped his head up, and his gaze, sharp as a dagger, locked onto mine. It wasn't the look of a husband worried for his wife who had just witnessed a horrific scene. Nor was it the look of a boss concerned for his employee. It was the look of a murderer who realizes his intended prey has narrowly escaped. He strode toward me and grabbed my arm, his grip so tight I cried out in pain. He snarled through clenched teeth, his voice trembling with a repressed fury. "What did you do? Why? Why her?" The illogical, accusatory question was like a bucket of ice water, snapping me back to reality. Why was he asking what I had done? Why was he so disappointed that the person on the floor was Jessica, and not me? I looked deep into Michael's bloodshot eyes and felt a horrifying truth begin to dawn. I yanked my hand free, struggling to maintain my composure, and replied in a voice as cold as ice. "What did I do? I simply gave her the food you cooked for me." "What are you thinking, Michael? Did you wish it was me on the floor?" Michael froze, as if realizing he'd said too much. He let go of my arm, took a step back, and ran a hand over his face to hide his panic and horror. The sound of an ambulance siren wailed from the street below, breaking the suffocating tension between us. Paramedics rushed up, quickly loaded Jessica onto a stretcher, and hurried her away. Michael ran to follow them, but before he stepped into the elevator, he shot me a look still simmering with hatred and menace. He commanded me, "You're coming to the hospital, too. This happened because of the food you gave her. Don't even think about shirking your responsibility." I watched the elevator doors close, swallowing the tears that threatened to fall. The man I had once blindly loved and trusted was a complete stranger, a calculating, sinister man. That breakfast. If it hadn't been for my morning sickness, if I hadn't given it to Jessica, the person lying in that pool of blood would have been me, and my unborn child would have shared my tragic fate. The cruel truth was beginning to reveal itself. Michael hadn't been trying to take care of me. He had wanted to kill our child, and perhaps me along with it. I clenched my fists so tightly my nails dug into my palms. I would go to the hospital. Not because I was afraid of his threats, but because I needed to witness this man's true face with my own eyes. Sitting on a cold plastic chair in front of the emergency room, I clasped my hands together to stop the trembling that racked my body. The fluorescent lights overhead reflected off the tiled floor, creating an atmosphere of sterile loneliness. Michael Anderson, the man who had shared my life for 3 years, paced anxiously before the ER doors like a caged animal. He ran his hands through his hair, bit his nails, and occasionally shot me sidelong glances, a mixture of suspicion and hatred, but he didn't dare approach me. Seeing his perfectly tailored suit now rumpled, I felt a profound bitterness. What was this man so worried about? The life of his young mistress? Or the fear that some dark secret was about to be exposed? Finally, the ER doors swung open, breaking the suffocating silence. A middle-aged doctor walked out, pulling off his mask, his face etched with seriousness and fatigue. Michael darted toward him like an arrow, his voice cracking with tension. "Doctor, how is she? Is it serious?" I rose slowly and approached, steadying my breath. The doctor looked from one of us to the other, his gaze lingering on Michael for a moment longer than necessary, before he slowly delivered his report. The patient presented with symptoms of acute poisoning. Fortunately, she arrived in time, and her life is not in danger. However, the cause of the severe hemorrhaging was the ingestion of a massive dose of misoprostol. I frowned at the medical term, but for Michael, it was a thunderbolt. The color drained from his face. His lips moved, but no sound came out. The doctor continued, his tone more firm. It's a drug used to induce uterine contractions, either to start labor or to cause a medical abortion. Given the extremely high dosage found in her stomach contents, it's clear this was not a simple case of food poisoning, but a deliberate act. As per regulations, we have notified the police. No sooner had he finished speaking than two uniformed police officers appeared at the end of the hallway. They approached with solemn expressions and asked for our cooperation in their investigation. At that moment, Michael seemed to snap back to reality. He hastily wiped a bead of sweat from his forehead, trying to summon the calm demeanor of the CEO he usually projected. He turned and pointed a trembling finger at me, his voice shaky but filled with accusation. "Officers, you must investigate this thoroughly. This morning, I prepared a chorizo breakfast skillet for my wife. She had the container in her office for a long time before she gave it to Miss Miller. I suspect my wife, in a fit of baseless jealousy, added something to it." I stared at Michael, feeling as if someone had squeezed my heart. He had his alibi all prepared. If I had eaten the breakfast, I would have lost my baby. Now that someone else had eaten it, he was determined to frame me as a poisoner. I took a deep breath, looked the older officer straight in the eye, and spoke calmly. "I have absolutely no motive to do such a thing. You can check the security footage from the hallway. If you find a vial, look for fingerprints. And most importantly, I want to know why a dish my husband claims he prepared to care for me contained an abortifacient, and why it had such a severe effect on his assistant." The officer nodded, taking notes, then asked the doctor a question that made both of us hold our breath. "Doctor, what is the victim's specific condition? What were the consequences of this drug?" The doctor sighed, his voice heavy with sorrow. "The patient, Miss Jessica Miller, was 6 weeks pregnant. The massive dose of the drug caused extremely violent uterine contractions. I'm afraid to inform you that the fetus did not survive." The world around me seemed to freeze. I heard Michael let out a strangled gasp. His legs gave out, and he collapsed onto a waiting room chair. His face crumbled, his eyes staring blankly into space. So that was it. The young, beautiful assistant had been carrying his child. And with his own wicked plan, intended for his wife, he had unwittingly snuffed out the life of his own illegitimate child, a child he probably never even knew existed. Looking at his pathetic state, I felt not satisfaction, but a wave of revulsion rising in my throat. The love he had professed for me, the passion he felt for his mistress, it all amounted to nothing in the face of his selfishness and cruelty. Following the shocking information from the doctor, the officers decided to question Michael and me separately, right there at the hospital. I was guided to a chair in a quieter corner of the hallway, facing the older officer, a man with sharp but calm eyes. He looked at me without judgment, almost with a hint of sympathy, and asked kindly, "Ma'am, please tell me everything that happened from the moment you received the food container until the incident occurred. Be as precise as you can. Don't leave out anything, no matter how minor it may seem." I closed my eyes, replaying the film of that fateful morning. I spoke of Michael's sudden appearance with an excessive display of affection that had been completely absent from our marriage for the past 6 months. I described the overpowering smell of the chorizo skillet that triggered my nausea. I explained that I had opened the lid, seen the contents, and immediately closed it. I emphasized that from the moment he placed the container on my desk until Jessica came in, I never moved from my chair, nor did I reopen the container. It was in plain sight the entire time, completely untouched. I gave it to Jessica simply because I couldn't eat it, and she seemed enthusiastic about the idea. On the other side of the hall, Michael was being questioned by the younger officer. I could hear him insisting that his cooking process was immaculate. "I went to the market myself, I went into the kitchen, I prepared that skillet since dawn. I'm a very meticulous person. I never let the housekeeper touch my wife's food. As soon as it was done, I put it in the insulated container and brought it straight to the office, without it passing through anyone else's hands." Michael was confident this statement would make him look like a model husband while simultaneously pointing to me as the only suspect, the only person who had contact with the container in a closed room. But in his panic, he was forgetting something fundamental. The more he insisted he was the only one who prepared everything, the more he was tightening the noose around his own neck. If it was proven, the poison was in the food from the start. When there was a pause in the questioning, the older officer walked over to his colleague, who was jotting down Michael's statement. They exchanged a few words in low voices, casting a discreet but meaningful glance toward Michael. Noticing this, he grew even more agitated. He shot to his feet, his voice louder than usual in an attempt to mask his fear. "Investigate her thoroughly. My wife has been very jealous lately. She's not in her right mind. She could have put the poison in when I left the office. Who knows?" I heard every one of his cruel words. How painful. The man I once loved was now using any means necessary to put me in prison to save himself. I stood up, walked toward them, and looked Michael straight in the face, asking with surprising calm. "Michael, if you think it was me, what would my motive be? To kill your assistant? Or are you afraid it will be revealed that the breakfast was never meant for Jessica, but for me?" Michael flinched. His eyes darted nervously, avoiding my gaze. He stammered, "What? What nonsense are you talking about?" Time passed with agonizing slowness. Every minute waiting for the lab results was a form of mental torture. I sat in silence, my hand resting gently on my stomach in an instinctual gesture to protect the tiny being caught in the eye of the hurricane. Finally, a forensics technician emerged with the results in hand. He announced in a solemn voice. "Fingerprints from Miss Catherine Pierce and the victim, Miss Jessica Miller, were found on the rim of the container and the spoon, which is consistent with the statements. However, the crucial point is that the toxic substance was fully dissolved in the food, permeating all the meat and eggs. This proves the drug was added during or immediately after cooking, while the skillet was still very hot, allowing it to be mixed in thoroughly. It wasn't simply sprinkled on top after the container was closed." This conclusion was like a bucket of ice water on Michael, completely demolishing the theory he had been trying to construct to incriminate me. If I had added the drug in my office when I received the container, it wouldn't have dissolved so uniformly. Michael's face turned from a pale white to an ashen gray. He lost control and began to ramble. "No, that's impossible. It must have been Jessica. Yes. She was pregnant. She wanted to have an abortion, so she took the pills before eating. You have to investigate her. Don't blame an innocent man." I watched my husband's pathetic display with a mixture of disgust and pity. The man who was once my pride was now revealed as a coward, unable to face the consequences of his actions. I raised my voice, cutting through his frantic babbling with firm resolution. "Stop struggling, Michael. If Jessica took the pills herself, why was the drug also in the food? Are you going to say she took the pills and then threw up into the container? Does your explanation even sound logical?" Michael suddenly turned on me, his eyes bloodshot. "Shut up. What do you know? You hate me. You orchestrated this whole circus to destroy me. It was you. You slipped it in when I wasn't looking." Even the officers looked weary of his stubbornness. The lead officer closed his file and looked at Michael with eyes as cold as a glacier. "Mr. Michael Anderson, your statements and the forensic results show a number of contradictions. We'll need you to accompany us to the station to clarify a few things. We will also be requesting the dashcam footage from your car and the security camera footage from your home kitchen to verify the preparation process you described." At the mention of cameras, Michael flinched as if he'd been electrocuted. I knew perfectly well there was a camera in our living room pointed directly at the kitchen, and his luxury sedan had a camera that recorded his every move. That was evidence that would not lie. If he had indeed added the drug to the food, it would have undoubtedly left a trace. Michael's gaze wavered violently. His initial confidence had completely vanished, replaced by the naked fear of a criminal before a court of law. He knew the trap he had set for his wife was now closing around his own neck. I stood up, straightened my clothes, and gave my despicable husband one last look before they led him away. "Michael, you once told me this breakfast was filled with your love. Now, I understand your love actually smells of poison. Fortunately, fate decided our child would not share the same destiny as that poor baby." I turned and walked away without looking back, leaving him standing in the middle of the cold hospital corridor, silently thanking life for giving me a chance to survive and seek justice for myself and the child in my womb. Leaving the hospital, I didn't go home. I hailed a cab and went straight to the office. The sky was gray, the clouds churning like the prelude to a great storm, a perfect reflection of my tumultuous state of mind. As I entered the building's lobby, I felt the curious stares and heard the hushed whispers of the employees. News of Jessica's poisoning had spread like a virus. The rumors were of all kinds, but the most malicious one was that the jealous boss's wife, having discovered her husband had gotten his assistant pregnant, had tried to poison her to teach her a lesson. Hearing those fabrications hurt like a knife. But I knew I couldn't break down now. I had to be strong, to stand firm, to discover the truth and clear my name. I went straight to my office, slamming the door shut to insulate myself from the gossip outside. A moment later, someone knocked softly on the door. It was Sarah Chen, my trusted assistant, who had been with me since the early days of my career. She came in with a worried expression, but her eyes were full of determination. She placed a USB drive on my desk and whispered, "Miss Pierce, I did as you asked. I've secured all the security camera footage from the building and the parking garage from this morning. I found something very strange." I plugged the drive into my computer, and a black and white image appeared on the screen. Sarah pointed to the timestamp. "Look. Mr. Anderson's car entered the parking garage at 7:15 a.m., but he didn't get out of the elevator and come to your office until 8:15 a.m. It usually takes less than 5 minutes to get from the garage to here. Where was he for that full hour? What was he doing?" Sarah's questions sent a chill through my veins. A missing hour. More than enough time to execute some dark plan. I peered at the screen, searching for more clues. Sarah switched the video to footage from another camera, in the basement emergency stairwell area. "And look at this. Pay attention to this man." On the screen, the silhouette of a man in a white shirt and a face mask appeared, walking briskly. He was carrying a fairly large black trash bag and, instead of using the trash cans on his floor, was surreptitiously heading from the elevator area toward the large dumpsters behind the building. "It's Kevin Johnson," I exclaimed, instantly recognizing his slightly stooped walk and characteristic hairstyle. Kevin Johnson was Michael's personal assistant and distant cousin, a man who followed his orders like a loyal dog. Why would he need to sneak down to throw out trash through the emergency stairs at that hour? And what was in that black bag? Drug packaging? Gloves? The evidence of a crime that Michael wanted to dispose of after preparing his deadly breakfast during that lost hour? Sarah looked at me, her voice firm. "I think there's crucial evidence in that trash bag. I sent someone to check the dumpsters, but the garbage truck just came by 30 minutes ago. However, I know Kevin is discreet but also very cheap. He doesn't usually throw important things in the public dumpster right away. He often hides them to dispose of later. I'll have someone keep a close eye on him." I nodded, squeezing Sarah's hand. "Thank you, Sarah. You're the only one I can trust right now. Be careful. They're cornered and could be very dangerous." Sarah left, leaving me alone in the vast office. I looked out the window. The rain had started to fall heavily, lashing against the glass. The web of Michael's lies and his accomplices was beginning to show fatal cracks. That lost hour, and Kevin's suspicious behavior were the keys to turning the tables. Outside, the rain showed no signs of stopping. Fat drops hammered against the glass, creating long streaks like indelible scars. Sitting in my office, the glow of the computer monitor illuminated my tired face, but my eyes burned with resolve. Sarah, my brilliant and efficient assistant, had just placed a thin but incredibly heavy file in front of me. She spoke in a low voice, her tone indignant on my behalf. "Miss Pierce, look at this. I had a contact in the building management office check. The luxury apartment where Jessica lives isn't leased in her name. It's under a commercial services company." I picked up the file. The name BND Management LLC stood out. It sounded grand, but I knew it was just a shell corporation. The company's legal representative was none other than Kevin Johnson, Michael's assistant and distant cousin. Sarah pointed to the attached bank statements and continued her analysis. The monthly rent, a staggering $6,000, plus high maintenance fees, are all transferred precisely from the BND management account. But the funds flowing into that company come from a slush fund Mr. Anderson created under the guise of entertainment expenses. I smiled bitterly, a smile that reached my soul. $6,000 a month in rent, not to mention living and shopping expenses. Meanwhile, the dress I was wearing was 3 years old. The wallet I used was a generic brand that cost barely $50. Michael was always complaining about the company's difficulties, telling me to tighten our belts to secure our future. It turned out the future he was worried about wasn't our families, but the luxurious love nest for his young mistress. I turned to the next page and found a candid photo of Jessica entering an elegant private clinic. The photo was from 2 weeks ago. Sarah explained she had gone for an obstetric checkup. That meant Jessica knew perfectly well she was carrying Michael's child. She wasn't as innocent as she appeared. She was using that pregnancy as a strategic card to force Michael to make a decision. I looked at Jessica's young, smooth face in the photo and felt a shiver. Behind that innocent facade was a calculated veteran. She wanted to become the lady of the house in one fell swoop, destroying my happiness to build her own castle. But she hadn't factored into her calculations that the man she had chosen as her pillar was a cold-blooded monster, willing to ruthlessly dispose of even his own child to protect his interests. The phone on the table suddenly vibrated, breaking the silence. The name my love lit up the screen. A name I hadn't gotten around to changing, which now sounded horrifically ironic. I took a deep breath. I placed a hand on my chest, calming my racing heart, and answered the call. On the other end, I heard Michael's deep, familiar voice, but now all I could hear was a stomach-turning falsehood. "Kate, where are you?" "I just got out of the police station. I'm so tired." They asked 1,000 questions. My head is pounding. I suppressed my rage and feigned a trembling, worried voice. "I'm at the office. I'm so scared, Michael. Everyone is whispering. I don't dare go home. Are you? Are you okay? Were the police hard on you?" Michael sighed dramatically on the other end, playing the part of the wronged husband. "What could they do to me? A man with nothing to hide has nothing to fear. I'm just worried about you. I'm afraid you'll get strange ideas and it will be bad for your health. Stay calm there, or maybe go stay with your mother for a bit. Don't listen to the gossip. I'll handle everything." Hearing those empty words of concern, I wanted to scream at him that I knew everything. But reason held me back. I had to let him feel confident, let him think I was still a naive little lamb, so he would make more mistakes. I replied softly. "Of course, I trust you. Get some rest. I'll be home a little late tonight. I have some things to finish up." I hung up and looked at the curtain of rain behind the window. "You think you're in control of the game, Michael? You're wrong." Night fell, and the city lit up with vibrant lights, but that brilliance couldn't hide the dark corners of the human heart. I received a message from the private investigator I had discreetly sent. Jessica's mother had already arrived at the bus terminal. She had taken the first bus from her small rural town as soon as she heard her daughter had an accident. I instructed the driver to take her to a modest but clean hotel near the hospital, emphasizing not to take her to see her daughter yet, as visiting hours were over. It was better for her to rest after the long journey. I arrived at the hotel a little after 9 in the evening. As soon as I entered the lobby, I recognized Jessica's mother. She was a small, thin figure, huddled on a sofa, wearing a simple brown dress. She had on worn-out sneakers, and next to her were 2 large cloth bags, filled to the brim with homemade baked goods and jars of preserves, the humble gifts a poor mother had struggled to bring for her daughter. The sight moved me, reminding me of my own grandmother down south, just as hard-working, sacrificing everything for her family. Seeing me approach, Jessica's mother stood up nervously, wringing her chapped, calloused hands. I smiled, took her hand, and spoke kindly. "You must be Jessica's mother. My name is Catherine. I'm Jessica's supervisor at the company. I heard you were coming and wanted to make sure you were all right, that you had eaten and had a place to rest." Tears welled up in the mother's eyes, and her voice, tinged with a thick regional accent, trembled. "You're our Jessica's boss. Oh, dear Lord, you're such a good person. I don't know what foolish thing my girl did to end up like this. She's a good, hard-working girl at home, you know?" I helped her sit down and poured her a glass of water. Seeing the love and pride in her eyes as she spoke about her daughter, I felt a knot form in my stomach. She didn't know her good, hard-working daughter was living in a luxury apartment she couldn't dream of in a lifetime of work. That she used designer handbags worth more than her entire life savings. I asked gently, "Does Jessica call you often? Does she talk about her life or her work?" The mother answered sincerely, "Oh, yes. She calls all the time. She says everyone at the company is so nice to her, the salary is good, and she lives in a free corporate apartment provided by the company, which is very nice. She sends me $100 every month for my medicine and tells me not to worry, that she wants for nothing." Hearing this, I couldn't help but sigh. $100 for her mother, but willing to spend thousands on a whim to please her lover. How flimsy and false was that filial devotion? I decided Jessica's mother had to see the truth, even though I knew it would be cruel to her. I feigned surprise. "Oh, she said she lives in a corporate apartment? I thought Jessica had rented a luxury penthouse on the Upper East Side. That's a very expensive neighborhood, a month's rent there is as much as a laborer's salary for a whole year. And I often see her carrying designer things. The bag she had the other day, I heard it costs almost $2,000. Jessica's mother froze. Her cloudy eyes widened with confusion. "What? What are you saying? $2,000 for a bag? That's impossible. My daughter is very frugal. She hates to throw away even a torn shirt. And she told me she lives in corporate housing." I gently patted the back of her hand, my voice lowered to a tone full of insinuation. I'm sure Jessica just didn't want to worry you, so she didn't tell you the truth. But don't worry. I'll take you to the hospital tomorrow. You can talk to her yourself and clear everything up. I'm just worried that a young, pretty girl might be taken advantage of by someone in a city full of temptations and ruin her life." My words planted a seed of doubt in the mother's heart. She sat there, staring blankly into space, her trembling hands fiddling with the hem of her dress. She was beginning to realize her little girl had become a stranger, hiding a terrible secret. I left the hotel with a heavy heart. I didn't want to hurt her, but she was the most important witness, the only person who could awaken Jessica's conscience and, at the same time, the leverage to unmask Michael. In this war, everyone would be hurt. Even the most innocent. The next morning, as I was about to leave the parking garage for the office, a figure blocked my path. I slammed on the brakes, my heart leaping into my throat. It was Kevin Johnson. He stood there anxiously, glancing around as if afraid someone would see him. He tapped gently on my car window, signaling he wanted to talk to me. I rolled the window down just enough for him to hear, maintaining a safe distance. "Miss Pierce, can I have a moment? I have something very important that Mr. Anderson asked me to deliver to you personally." His voice was a nervous whisper. I smiled with contempt and unlocked the door just enough for him to slip into the passenger seat. In the confined space of the car, I could smell the sour scent of sweat and stale cigarettes on him. He was clearly very nervous. He took a thin file from his jacket, placed it on his lap, and then pulled his hands back as if it were on fire. "What is this?" I asked coldly, not even looking at him. It's an old medical record of Miss Jessica Miller that Mr. Anderson found this morning." "And?" Kevin stammered, sweat beading on his forehead. "Inside. Right here. Is a receipt for a purchase of medicine, abortion pills, that she bought from a back alley pharmacy yesterday. Mr. Anderson said to take this and casually pass it to the police, saying you found it by chance in Jessica's desk drawer. That way, Mr. Anderson will be cleared of suspicion, and you won't be implicated either." I took the file and opened it slowly. Inside was a superficial medical report and a crumpled receipt. I held the receipt up to the light. The handwriting was scribbled, and the drug, misoprostol, was clearly stated. The date of purchase was the previous afternoon, but the most suspicious thing was that the ink on the receipt was fresh, and the paper was pristine, without a single crease. It was obvious this was a fake invoice, hastily created the night before. The evidence burning in my hand, I turned to him, my gaze so sharp he flinched. "You and Michael must think I'm an idiot. The ink on this receipt isn't even dry. And you want me to give this to the police? That's like asking me to confess to forging evidence. Or is what you two really want to frame Jessica, to make it look like she bought the pills and tried to commit suicide out of depression? So Michael gets off scotangent free, and I bear the responsibility for knowing and not stopping her?" Kevin turned pale. His lips trembled uncontrollably. "No, Miss Pierce, it's not like that. The CEO said to just hand it over and everything would be resolved. You're his wife, Miss Pierce. You have to help him. If something happens to him, the company will fall, and you'll lose everything too." He was trying to play the fear card, the fear of losing my assets and my status. But he was wrong. This company was my parents' blood, sweat, and tears. I would rather destroy it and start from scratch than leave it in the hands of a murderer. I threw the file at him, my voice firm. "Take this garbage and get out of my car now. And tell Michael if he wants to put on a play. He should hire more professional actors. And you, Kevin Johnson, you're an accomplice to a murderer. You'd better start worrying about yourself before you regret it in a prison cell." Kevin hastily grabbed the file, opened the door, and ran as if a demon were chasing him. Watching his pathetic figure disappear behind a concrete pillar, I knew Michael was desperate. He was sinking in the mud he had created, and the more he struggled, the tighter the noose became. This clumsy charade, far from saving him, was just additional proof of the cruelty and baseness of my despicable husband and his boss. Returning to my office, I immediately called for Sarah. The atmosphere in the office was tense, like a command center in the midst of a battle. Sarah placed a laptop on my desk, her face glowing with the excitement of someone who had just discovered a treasure. "Miss Pierce, it's just as we suspected. I've reviewed all of Mr. Anderson and Mr. Johnson's phone records from the past week. There's an unknown number that appears with surprising frequency the night before the incident. I did some digging and found out who it belongs to. You won't believe it. It's Susan Davis." "Susan Davis." I searched my memory for the name. Sarah quickly added. "Susan Davis was a college classmate of Mr. Anderson. She's a pharmacist now, a sales rep for a large pharmaceutical company. According to the older women in HR, they used to date, but they broke up when he married you. I never imagined they had started talking again. A pharmacist. An ex-girlfriend. And secret late-night calls. All the scattered pieces were starting to fit into a complete picture. Michael, afraid of being caught, couldn't buy the restricted drug himself, so he turned to Susan. Perhaps he had lured her with promises of money, or perhaps he had rekindled old feelings to persuade her to help him. Did you find any proof they met? I asked, feeling my heart beat 1,000 miles a minute. Sarah nodded, her fingers flying across the keyboard. Here it is. I hired a private investigator to get security footage from the area near Kevin's shell company. Look at this corner of the screen. On the monitor, a black and white video appeared, of somewhat grainy quality, but clear enough to recognize the people. A sedan stopped in a discreet corner. Kevin Johnson got out and looked around. A moment later, a tall woman in sunglasses approached. It was Susan. She handed Kevin a small package wrapped in newspaper. He took it, quickly put it in his pocket, and the two of them hastily parted ways. The date and time on the camera corresponded to the afternoon before the incident. A small package wrapped in newspaper, I murmured, my eyes glued to the screen. That's the poison. Susan is the one who provided Michael with the weapon. I turned to Sarah with a steady gaze. Sarah, this is the weakest link in their chain. Susan is educated. She has a stable career. She might have done this for money or for love, but I'm sure she's not a professional criminal. She'll be terrified when she realizes she's facing prison time as an accomplice to attempted murder. Sarah immediately understood my intention. You want to put psychological pressure on her. I nodded, a cold smile on my face. Exactly. Michael is trying to blame Jessica, and it's very likely he has a plan to blame Susan too. When everything comes out, he'll say she gave him the drug on her own, or that she tricked him into thinking it was a vitamin supplement. We have to get ahead of him. I'm going to meet with Susan and show her the dark future Michael has prepared for her. Between going to jail for her ex-lover or testifying for a lenient sentence, I trust Susan is smart enough to know which path to choose. The net was cast, and the most important prey was about to be caught. I knew the impending meeting with Susan would be a game of mental chess, but I was holding an ace up my sleeve that Michael couldn't even imagine. The raw, cruel truth was about to see the light of day, and those who sow the wind will, inevitably, reap the whirlwind. The next morning, the sky was still covered by a gray blanket, as if threatening to unleash another storm on the city. I picked up Jessica's mother from the hotel and took her to the hospital to see her daughter. The old woman from the countryside was still carrying her canvas tote bag, filled with homemade breads and fresh preserves. Our Jessica loves my homemade jam, she told me. She says the store-bought ones in the city have no flavor. Hearing her words, my heart clenched. A mother's love is as vast as the ocean. But her daughter had traded that love for the vanity and luxury of the city. Upon entering the hospital room, the strong smell of antiseptic made Jessica's mother wrinkle her nose and hesitate before going in. Jessica had been moved to a regular ward. She lay on the white bed, pale and gaunt like a withered leaf. At the sight of her mother, her eyes flickered, and her dry lips barely managed to form a weak, "Mom." Jessica's mother rushed to the bed, set her bag on the floor, and took her daughter's cold hands while tears streamed down her face. "My child, how did you end up like this? Why did this happen to you?" Jessica turned her head, avoiding her mother's gaze, bitter tears rolling down her cheeks. But with the instinct of a mother who had counted every penny, Jessica's mother's eyes fixed on the bedside table. There sat Jessica's expensive designer handbag, next to the latest model smartphone. The contrast between those luxury items, the worn bag on the floor, and the mother's second-hand clothes created a suffocating atmosphere. Jessica's mother pointed a trembling finger at the purse, her voice cracking. "That bag. Miss Pierce said it costs $2,000. Where did you get the money to buy that? With the money you earn, it must be tight even to send me a little. How could you think of wasting money like that?" Jessica shot a terrified look at me, then turned to her mother and denied everything. "No, Mom. Miss Pierce is mistaken. It's a fake. I bought it at the market for $20. Don't listen to what other people say." I leaned against the door, observing the clumsy performance in silence. I slowly approached the bed, placed a hand on Jessica's shoulder, and whispered in her ear, my voice low, but carrying enough menace to instill a terrible fear. "You think Michael is coming to see you? He's too busy trying to prove to the police that you bought the pills. Whether this bag is real or fake, you and he know better than anyone. Stop lying to your mother." Jessica froze, staring at me with panicked eyes. Horror gripped her. She understood that I knew everything, and more importantly, that the man she had entrusted her life to was discarding her like a useless object. Jessica's mother, seeing her daughter tremble, thought it was from pain and began massaging her hand, whispering words of comfort. Watching the scene, I felt not satisfaction, but a deep sadness. The raw truth had to come out sooner or later. And the one who would suffer the most would not be the guilty party, but the innocent mother who loved her daughter with all her heart. I sat in a chair a little way off, pretending to look at my phone to give them space, but in reality, I was observing every change in Jessica's mood. Before I left, I had deliberately left the file Kevin gave me that morning on the bedside table, near Jessica's bag. I left it slightly open, so a corner of the fake receipt for the purchase of misoprostol was visible. I knew Jessica's curiosity, and above all, her desperate need in her fragile state to cling to any clue related to Michael, would be a burning hook. And so it was. The moment her mother turned her back to pour some water, Jessica secretly peeked at the file, grabbed it, and quickly scanned it. I saw her thin shoulders shake as she saw the receipt with her name on it. Her face turned from pale to a waxy white. She recognized the handwriting, the name of the drug, and most importantly, the dark intention behind that piece of paper. The man who had promised her a future was now forging evidence to make her the murderer of her own child. The blind faith shattered in an instant, leaving behind an abyss of despair. At that moment, the door opened, and a doctor entered with a nurse. He reviewed the chart and looked at Jessica with pity. The atmosphere became heavy. The doctor sighed and announced in a solemn voice. The family needs to prepare. The severe contractions from the overdose and the prolonged bleeding have caused serious damage to her uterus. We've taken all possible measures, but her ability to become a mother in the future is almost non-existent. The news fell like a thunderbolt. Jessica's mother collapsed to the floor, sobbing. Oh, God, no. My daughter is still so young. Why is heaven so cruel to her? The old woman's cries were a heartbreaking wail. Jessica, motionless on the bed, did not shed a single tear, her empty eyes fixed on the ceiling. The pain was beyond what she could feel. No child, no possibility of being a mother, betrayed by her lover. Everything had collapsed at once, destroying her life. I went over to help Jessica's mother up, my heart clenching. I looked at Jessica, and in her empty eyes, I saw the wreckage of her broken dreams. I leaned over her again and whispered. My voice cold and filled with bitterness. You see? This is the price for stealing another woman's husband. The price for that designer handbag is very high. He didn't just take your child, he took your future as a mother. Do you still want to protect him? Jessica turned her head and looked at me. Her lips moved, and a deep hatred shone in her eyes. I left the hospital with a soul frozen in ice and drove to the place where I had arranged to meet Susan. It was a discreet coffee shop in a side street, elegantly decorated, and most importantly, with a security camera system that clearly recorded every corner. I chose a corner table that allowed me to see the entrance without losing privacy. I stirred my orange juice, trying to calm my mind before the coming storm. At the appointed time, Susan appeared. She entered with the polished, arrogant air of a successful woman. She wore a wine-colored silk dress that highlighted her skin and figure, carrying a designer bag and wearing sunglasses that covered half of her face. She surveyed the place and stopped when she saw me. A half-smile of contempt played on her lips. She approached and sat down in front of me with an air of superiority, removing her glasses to reveal sharp, meticulously made-up eyes. Hello, Catherine, she said, her voice sweet but sharp. I never thought the model wife would summon her husband's ex-lover to a place like this. What do you want from me? Need some advice on how to keep a man? Although I find it surprising he has to come crying to me because you bore him so much. Her words were a deliberate provocation, an attempt to hurt me to see my reaction. At another time, I might have been furious or burst into tears. But the Catherine of today had suffered too much to be affected by cheap taunts. I looked at her calmly and smiled slightly. Susan, I didn't call you here to make a jealousy scene, or to fight for a cheating man. A man like Michael, I'll give him to you as a gift if you want him. I'm here to save you from an impending disaster, before you become a criminal. Susan let out a laugh that echoed in the quiet of the shop. Save me? You've got to be kidding. What do I need to be saved from? I have money, a career, freedom. You should worry about yourself. I didn't argue. I took out my phone and opened the photo the investigator had obtained from the security camera. I slid it across the table, my voice hardening. Look at this carefully. The day before yesterday, in the afternoon, in an alley near Kevin Johnson's office, you met him. The small package wrapped in newspaper you gave him. What was in it? Vitamins? Or was it misoprostol? Susan's smile vanished instantly. She grabbed the phone, her hands trembling as she stared at the photo. Her color changed, and not even the thick layer of makeup could hide the panic in her eyes. The cigarette she was about to light fell onto the table. She looked up, all her confidence gone, and said in a cracking voice, "Where did you get this?" I just gave Mr. Johnson some documents. Don't you dare falsely accuse me." I looked her straight in the eye. "Documents that have to be wrapped in newspaper and delivered in secret? Susan, you're a pharmacist. You know the regulations on restricted drugs better than anyone. The police aren't fools. Once they trace the source of that drug, do you really think you can get away with it?" Susan slumped in her chair. Her initial arrogance was gone, leaving only a terrified woman on the edge of an abyss. She knew I had her. It was time for the final blow. I leaned back in my chair, my voice lowering to a tone that was both a threat and an offer. "Susan, do you think Michael will protect you? This morning, he ordered Kevin to forge evidence to blame Jessica. If the police close in on him, what do you think he'll testify? He'll say that you, his jealous and jilted ex, tricked him into buying the poison to harm his wife." Susan shuddered, her eyes wide with horror. She knew Michael's selfish nature all too well. I continued the psychological assault. "You have money, beauty, a brilliant future. Do you want to trade all that for an accomplice to attempted murder charge? How much did Michael promise you? 50,000? 100,000? Do you think that money will buy you your freedom or your dignity when you get out of prison with a criminal record?" Every question was like a hammer blow to her mind. She covered her face and burst into tears, her shoulders shaking with sobs. Her mask had crumbled, revealing her weakness and belated regret. "I don't want to go to jail," she sobbed. "I thought it was just a normal abortion drug. Michael told me his wife, you, were pregnant with another man's child and he wanted to get rid of it to get a divorce. I just wanted to help him and earn some money." I smiled bitterly. For them, the life of a child was just a means to an end. I leaned toward her. "Now is not the time to cry. You have only one way out. Give me the proof that Michael ordered it. The messages, the call recordings. I'll hand them over to the police and I will make sure they understand you were deceived and used. You'll be a witness, you'll get a lenient sentence, and you'll have a chance to start over. It's either prison with Michael, or save yourself. You choose." Susan looked up, torn between fear and a fragile hope. She bit her lip until it bled in an internal struggle that felt like an eternity. Finally, the instinct for survival won. She opened her designer bag, took out a small silver USB drive, and pushed it toward me as if it were a burning coal. "Here. It's all here," she said, her voice hoarse. "The call recordings of him asking for the drug, the messages with the wire transfer for the payment, even his promises to leave you and come back to me. Take it. Please, just don't let me go to jail." I snatched the USB drive and closed my hand around it. It was cold, but it contained enough fire to burn Michael's career and his life. I stood up, gave Susan one last look, a mixture of pity and warning. "You made the right choice. Keep your mouth shut and wait for my call. And don't even think about warning Michael, or you'll lose your last chance." The small USB drive in my hand felt like it weighed a ton. I knew it didn't just contain data, but the death sentence for my marriage. I didn't have the courage to go home or stay at the office, so I drove to my friend the investigator's office, which had the best soundproofing, to face the truth. The room was dark, lit only by the blue glow of the computer monitor. The whirring of the fan made me tense. My hands trembled so much when I inserted the USB drive that I failed twice. A folder appeared, containing audio files and screenshots of messages, all meticulously organized by date by Susan. It was clear she too had prepared in case Michael betrayed her. I clicked on the most recent recording, from 3 days ago. My husband's familiar, chilling voice came through the speakers. It sounded cold and authoritative, very different from his usual calm tone. "Susan, I need you to find something for me. Something strong, tasteless and odorless, that can be mixed into food. My wife has been having bad morning sickness, and I want to make it look like a natural miscarriage so I can kick her out of the house cleanly without a messy divorce settlement. That pregnancy is an obstacle. Understood?" Every word was like a poisoned needle piercing my ears and my heart. I covered my mouth to keep from sobbing, hot tears streaming down my cheeks and falling onto my cold hands. So the original target of that breakfast was me and my unborn baby. He didn't want to take care of me. He wanted to kill his own child to protect the fortune he coveted. What happened to Jessica was an accident, a cruel irony of fate that had saved my life and my baby's. Then I listened to the recording of the call between Michael and Susan after Jessica was hospitalized. Michael's voice was full of panic and cruelty. "Shut up and don't be stupid. We'll pin everything on Jessica. Say she bought the pills herself. I'll handle the police. If you even think about saying a word about me, I'll make you regret it. Remember, if I go down, you won't live in peace either." The blatant threats and lack of responsibility filled me with deep revulsion. The man I had loved, the man with whom I had shared 3 years of my life, was a demon in human disguise, willing to sacrifice his mistress and his old friend to save his position and his fake honor. I copied all the data to 3 different devices. I sent one copy to a secret email, another to my lawyer, and kept the original in my purse. I stared at the dark computer screen, placed a hand on my stomach, and whispered to my baby, "Sweetheart, forgive your mother for choosing the wrong father for you. But don't worry, I will never let anyone harm you again. Tomorrow, I will make the guilty pay for every one of our tears." My pain had transformed into a cold, hard resolve. I knew there was no turning back, and I didn't want to. At the company, the tension was palpable in the air. The employees whispered about the scandal, walking on eggshells. Sitting in my office, my eyes were glued to my computer screen, which was displaying the feed from a hidden security camera Sarah had installed in the accounting department. Kevin Johnson, his shirt soaked with sweat, was pacing like a caged animal. He was trying to access the accounting system to erase the traces of the money transfers. He knew the financial crimes investigation team could raid at any moment, and the transfers to Susan's account and his shell company would be irrefutable proof. But Kevin didn't know that Sarah and my trusted IT team had taken control of the system the night before. Any attempt to delete data was blocked, and the system saved a backup and sent me an alert. I watched the despair on Kevin's face when the words "Access Denied" appeared on his screen in red letters. He slammed the keyboard, tore at his hair, and then called someone. I put on my headphones. I activated the hidden microphone I had installed under Michael's desk months ago when I began to suspect his infidelity. Kevin's voice was trembling and terrified. "Sir, we're finished. The system won't let me delete the data. I think someone has locked my admin access. What do we do? If the police check the books, I'm done for." On the other end, Michael's voice roared like a wounded animal. "You useless fool. I told you to be careful. Now listen to me. Find a way to blame Jessica. Forge evidence, create fake emails showing she suffered from severe depression and wanted to commit suicide. We have to make people believe she was crazy. Understood? But sir, she just lost her baby. That would be too cruel." Kevin protested weakly. Michael let out a frozen laugh that made me shiver. "Cruelty, or prison? You choose. If you don't do it, I guarantee you'll be rotting in a cell right next to Susan. Now move." The call ended, leaving a terrible silence. Kevin slumped in his chair, covering his face with his hands. His shoulders shook. I took off my headphones, feeling absolute contempt. Even at the last moment, Michael showed no remorse. He was still trying to trample on the suffering of others to save himself, wanting to turn Jessica, the victim of his betrayal, into a crazy woman who tried to commit suicide. The news that Michael and Kevin were spreading rumors that Jessica had attempted suicide out of depression spread quickly through the company and, of course, reached the ears of Jessica's mother. The humble woman from the countryside, who had spent her life tilling the land, transformed into a lioness protecting her cub. She stormed into the company lobby during lunchtime, when it was full of people. She wore her second-hand clothes and worn-out sneakers, but her face reflected an indomitable fury. Crying and shouting, her voice cracking with pain, she yelled, "Where is that despicable CEO? Come out here. You deceived my daughter, ruined her life, and now you dare to accuse her of trying to commit suicide? God sees everything, and your punishment will come soon." The security guards tried to stop her, but no one dared to be rough with such a tormented old woman. A crowd gathered, whispering and recording with their phones. Michael had no choice but to come out. He emerged from his private elevator with a scowl, trying to maintain a facade of calm. He approached Jessica's mother and said in a low, threatening voice, "Ma'am, please calm down. Let's talk in my office. Don't make a scene here." Jessica's mother stared at him with bloodshot eyes and pointed a finger at him. "I'm not going anywhere. If you have something to say, say it here, so everyone can hear. You said my daughter wanted to commit suicide. My child loves life. She was sending me money to fix our house, why would she want to die? It was you, you hypocrite. You did this to her." Michael turned pale and signaled to Kevin to bring a thick envelope. He tried to force it into Jessica's mother's hands, whispering, "Here's $5,000. Use it for expenses and take her back to the countryside. Don't make things harder for me. I'm a victim here too. From the mezzanine, I witnessed the entire scene with a sinking heart. $5,000. Was that the price for a young woman's dignity, health, and future? Jessica's mother opened the envelope. At the sight of the bills, she let out a bitter laugh and suddenly threw them in Michael's face. The bills flew through the air like dry leaves. I may be poor, but I won't let you buy your way out of this, she screamed, with a wail that silenced the entire lobby. Keep your dirty money. I'm reporting you to the police, and I'll take you to court even if I have to sell my house to get my daughter's honor back. Michael stood paralyzed in the rain of money, his face red with humiliation and rage. The crowd began to point at him, their gazes full of contempt. At that moment, I knew Michael had lost. He could buy many things with his money, but he couldn't buy the pride of a mother who loved her child. The image of those falling bills would be an indelible stain on his life. After the scandal at the company, I returned home at dusk. The huge house was dark and as cold as a tomb. I found Michael in the living room, sitting on the sofa with a glass of whiskey in his hand, staring into space. He didn't even look up when I arrived. You're back, he said, his voice hoarse. It was quite a show at the office today. You must have been satisfied to see me humiliated by an old woman from the countryside in front of all the employees. I turned on the lights. His face was gaunt and pale. I put my purse on the table and answered calmly. I'm not satisfied. I'm sad. I'm sad you let things get to this point. Why did you give her the money? That's like admitting your guilt. Michael let out a bitter laugh and downed his whiskey in one gulp. What do you know? In this world, what can't be solved with money, can be solved with more money. That old woman is just a fool. He went to the kitchen and came back with a glass of warm milk. He placed it in front of me, his voice strangely soft. Forget about what happened at the office. Drink this. It's good for you. I'm worried you've gotten too thin lately. It's imported milk, very good for pregnant women. The words pregnant women made my heart freeze. Was he testing me? Or was he trying to poison me again? I stared at the steaming glass of milk as if it were a poisoned chalice. I picked it up, feeling the heat in my hands, and looked him straight in the eye. Michael, do you remember the breakfast skillet from the other day? You said it was to take care of me too, and Jessica almost died. Are you sure this glass of milk only contains milk? His face changed. The smile vanished. He took a step back, his gaze wavering. What? What are you talking about? Are you suspecting me? I'm your husband. I smiled bitterly, stood up, and walked with the glass of milk toward the potted plant in the corner of the room. Slowly, under Michael's horrified gaze, I poured all the milk into the soil. I'm not suspecting you, I said, my voice like ice. I'm just afraid it might not agree with me, just like it didn't agree with Jessica. Plants need nutrients too, right? Let's see if it's still alive tomorrow. The clink of the glass on the table was dry and echoing. Michael stared at me, his eyes no longer holding any pretense, only pure terror. He knew. He knew that I knew everything. The charade of a happy marriage was over. It was going to be the longest night of our lives, because at dawn, the real storm would break, sweeping away the rotten remains of our marriage. The next morning, I woke up earlier than usual and dressed carefully in front of the mirror. Today was not just a shareholders' meeting. It was a funeral. The funeral of my 3-year marriage and the farewell to the traitors in my life. When I entered the company, the silence was almost absolute. Everyone seemed to feel the storm coming. I went straight to the large conference room, where the shareholders and the board of directors were already gathered. Michael was presiding over the table. His gray suit seemed too big for him, and the dark circles under his eyes betrayed his anxiety, though he tried to hide it by tapping a pen rhythmically on the table. When he saw me enter, his gaze flickered with suspicion, but he quickly looked away. He cleared his throat and signaled to Kevin to begin the meeting. The main agenda item was the approval of an eco-resort project, which Michael presented as a golden opportunity, but I knew it was a cover to divert company funds to his shell companies and empty the coffers before our divorce. Kevin, sweating despite the air conditioning, presented the project, his voice trembling. The shareholders whispered. Some frowned at the incredible numbers. When it was time to vote, Michael stood up, trying to sound firm. Ladies and gentlemen, this is a unique opportunity. I urge you to trust the board's vision and approve the resolution. Just as he was about to raise his hand to vote, I stood up slowly. The sound of my chair scraping against the floor caught everyone's attention. I stared at Michael steadily and said in a calm but glacial voice. Just a moment, Mr. CEO. And fellow shareholders. Before we discuss how to spend the company's money, I believe we need to address the moral integrity and legal competence of the man managing it. Michael slammed his hand on the table. Catherine, this is a strategy meeting, not a playground to air my personal problems. I didn't flinch. Michael, having an affair and an illegitimate child is a personal problem. But using company money to maintain your mistress, creating shell companies to launder capital, and, most seriously, buying illegal substances to harm another person. That is a legal problem that concerns the survival of this company. The shareholders here have the right to know if their money is in the hands of a CEO or a criminal suspect. The room erupted in a murmur of shock. Michael, pale, trembled and pointed at me, but couldn't form a coherent sentence. Before he could react, I signaled to Sarah to connect my laptop to the projector. The large screen behind Michael lit up. First, the bank statements showing the transfers to Jessica's account and Kevin's company numbers in the hundreds of thousands highlighted in red. Then, the screenshots of messages between Michael and Kevin. Even the shareholders who had previously supported him shook their heads with looks of disappointment and anger. This is just the preliminary evidence of embezzlement, I said. And the most terrible part is yet to come. I clicked on the audio file Susan had given me. The room fell into complete silence. Michael's unmistakable voice echoed, cruel and cold. I wanted to look like a natural miscarriage. Cleanly. That pregnancy is an obstacle. Get me something strong. Every word was like an echo from hell. Some of the female shareholders covered their mouths in horror. Michael, crazed, tried to rip out the projector cable, shouting that it was a fabrication. Turn it off. It's a fake. This woman doctored my voice. But Sarah and 2 security guards I had prepared stopped him. Michael struggled, desperate and pathetic. He turned to Kevin for help, but he was hiding under the table, trembling. I approached Michael. A fake? What about the toxicology analysis of the breakfast you prepared with your own hands, and the statement of your ex-lover, Susan, whom you used to get the drug? No one set a trap for you, Michael. Your own greed and wickedness dug your grave. I turned to the shareholders. Ladies and gentlemen, I have all the evidence and witnesses. I have already sent a copy to the police. To facilitate the investigation and protect the reputation of this company, I propose the immediate dismissal of CEO Michael Anderson. A timid applause began, which soon grew into a standing ovation. Michael slid down the wall to the floor, defeated. His career, his honor, everything, had crumbled in a single morning. Just as the applause swelled, the conference room doors flew open. 2 police officers from the station entered, followed by Susan, her face hidden behind sunglasses, and my lawyer. Susan's appearance was the final blow. Michael stared at her in disbelief. Susan, what are you doing here? An officer approached Michael and said in a firm voice. Mr. Michael Anderson, you are under arrest on suspicion of assault and trafficking of a harmful substance. Meanwhile, the other officer headed toward Kevin, who was cowering in a corner. At the sight of the police, Kevin panicked and burst into tears. I don't know anything. Michael made me do it. He forced me to do everything. Forge the documents, destroy the evidence. I was just following orders. I'll confess everything. Please, leave me alone. Kevin's quick and cowardly betrayal left Michael stunned. You traitor, he hissed. But before he could say more, the metallic click of handcuffs silenced him. The hands that had signed million-dollar contracts, the hands that had caressed my hair, were now locked in cold metal rings. As they led him past me, Michael stopped. Catherine, how long have you been planning this? Why were you so cruel? We were married. I looked at him, feeling nothing but a great emptiness. I leaned in and whispered in his ear. From the day you brought me that breakfast. From the day you tried to kill our child, you call me cruel? Compared to trying to poison your wife and child, sending you to prison is almost an act of mercy. Goodbye, ex-husband. Michael hung his head, and with his back stooped, he left the room, a lonely and pathetic figure. The door closed, but the echo of his arrest remained in everyone's mind. In the cold interrogation room of the police station, Michael, gaunt and with his suit wrinkled, was confronted with the irrefutable evidence. The statements of Susan and Kevin, the toxicology analysis, and the audio recordings left no room for doubt. He broke down and confessed to buying the drug to harm me and protect his fortune. However, he insisted that what happened to Jessica was an accident, that he didn't know she was pregnant. I really didn't know she was pregnant, he sobbed. She told me she was on birth control. It was just a fling. I'm not stupid enough to let it have consequences. If I had known, I would have forced her to have an abortion much earlier. His words were so cold and cruel that even the detective frowned. For Michael, the life of a child was just a problem to be eliminated. The detective slid a report across the table. You say you didn't know, but science doesn't lie. This is the fetal analysis. It confirms with 99.99% certainty that it was your biological child. And for the record, it was a boy. Michael trembled, snatched the document, his eyes fixed on the words paternity confirmed. A boy. It was a boy, he muttered, before banging his head on the table and letting out a pained, animalistic scream. He cried, but not out of remorse, but for the loss of the male heir he so desperately craved to carry on his name. He was obsessed with his legacy, and one of the reasons he resented me was because he suspected my baby would be a daughter, someone he believed couldn't inherit his empire. Behind a one-way mirror, I watched everything with a shiver. Even at his lowest moment, he only thought of himself and his colossal ego. Human life, even his own flesh and blood, meant nothing to him. Fortunately, that poor child would not have to be born to call a man like him father. I turned and left, thanking heaven for protecting my daughter. Jessica was discharged from the hospital a week later. The doctors said her life was saved, but she could never be a mother again. Her luxury apartment was sealed off due to the investigation, so her mother had to take her to a damp, cramped rental room on the outskirts of the city. Before they returned to the countryside, I visited them. The smell of mold hit me at the door. In the small room, Jessica sat in a corner with disheveled hair and empty eyes, a shadow of the once elegant woman she was. Her mother was packing some worn-out clothes into a cloth bag. Seeing me, she wiped away her tears. Miss Pierce, we're leaving. We don't want to be a bother anymore. My daughter knows she did wrong. I looked at the woman, bent by the weight of life, and felt deep compassion. She had sacrificed her whole life hoping her daughter would succeed. And the only reward she received was a broken daughter, both physically and mentally. I left a thick envelope on the plastic table. Jessica's mother refused to take it. No, please. It's already a blessing that you didn't press charges against her. This money is too heavy. I took her hand and pressed it into her palm. Please, take it. This isn't charity. It's her last paycheck, with a little extra for travel and medical expenses. Take good care of her. Encourage her to start over. She has already paid a very high price for her mistakes. Jessica's mother burst into tears. How miserable I am. Why was my daughter so unlucky? Deceived by a married man, and now she's broken. How am I going to face my neighbors? Jessica, too, began to sob in her corner, unable to look at me. Regret and shame consumed her. Jessica, I said, my voice serious but calm. You lost a child and the ability to be a mother, which is the greatest pain for a woman. But let this be a lesson. Don't build your happiness on the suffering of others. And don't believe that beauty can buy you eternal happiness. Live with dignity, respecting your mother. Don't ever make her cry because of you again. A taxi was waiting for them. Her mother helped Jessica out. With tear-filled eyes, Jessica took one last look at the city, once her promised land, now the stage of her worst nightmare. I watched them drive away, hoping the peace of the countryside would heal her wounds, though I knew the scars would remain forever. After Michael's arrest, the company was in chaos, employees disoriented, partners suspicious, and the stock plummeted. As the majority shareholder and owner of the key evidence, the board elected me as interim CEO. My first move was to fire Michael and Kevin's entire team of confidants. I wanted to clean up the corruption in the company and lead it with transparency and honesty. I held a press conference, publicly apologized, and promised to get the company back on its feet. My sincerity and determination managed to restore some of the market's confidence. Seeing the financial charts start to recover, I breathed a sigh of relief and whispered to my baby. We did it, sweetheart. My grandfather's legacy is safe. But the calm didn't last long. That afternoon, my mother-in-law, wearing an immaculate Chanel suit, stormed into my office. Her face was red with rage. You viper. You evil woman. You put my son in jail to take everything. My son is a good man. He couldn't kill anyone. You set a trap for him. I calmly asked my assistant to leave and close the door. I looked at the woman I once called mom, now a blind and cruel mother-in-law. I offered her a glass of water. Calm down. Your son is a good man? A man good enough to buy poison to kill his own grandchild? My mother-in-law was speechless but insisted. Don't slander him. He didn't know the other woman was pregnant. It was a mistake. Men are like that. As his wife, you should have been more understanding, not put him in jail. You have no heart. Her audacity overwhelmed me. I grabbed my tablet and showed her the video of Michael's confession and the recordings with Susan. I pressed play. Her son's voice echoed, clear and cruel. I want it to look like a natural miscarriage. That pregnancy is an obstacle. As she listened, my mother-in-law's face crumbled. She saw her perfect son revealed as a monster. When the video ended, she collapsed onto the sofa, trembling. She couldn't believe the son she was so proud of was capable of such an atrocious act. "Do you understand now?" I said, my voice soft but firm. "That breakfast was for me. If I had eaten it, your grandchild in my womb would no longer be here." He wanted to kill not only his assistant's child, but our child too. "Your grandchild. Do you still want to defend him?" My mother-in-law looked at my belly, then at me. The truth was too cruel. She covered her mouth and burst into tears, tears of shame and regret. She stood up, staggering, and left without daring to look at me. I watched her stooped back and felt a twinge of pity. She was a mother too, but her blind love and misguided upbringing had contributed to this tragedy. A week later, I received a summons from my lawyer to visit Michael in the detention center and finalize the divorce. With the papers in hand, I crossed the cold gates of the prison. The air smelled of confinement and dampness. They led me to a visiting room, and I sat in front of a thick glass pane. A moment later, they brought Michael in. I barely recognized him. In just a few weeks, he seemed to have aged 10 years. A shaved head, a gaunt face, his once arrogant eyes were now cloudy and filled with fear. He wore a prisoner's uniform that was too big for him. At the sight of me, a spark of hope flickered in his eyes. He leaned against the intercom, his voice trembling. "Catherine, you came to see me? I knew you still loved me. Drop the charges, please. I made a mistake. I'll really change. Think of our 3 years together, think of our child. A son needs a father." I looked at him with a calm heart. His pleas, which would have once moved me, now seemed ridiculous. He was using our son as a shield. The very son he had tried to kill. I slid a copy of the divorce papers through the slot. "My lawyers sent the official documents to your attorney this morning. Sign them. The love ended the day you tried to poison me. And my child doesn't need a father who tried to kill his mother. You don't deserve to be a father." Michael grabbed the papers, trembling. He saw the words, "Divorce Decree," and a tear fell onto the paper. "Catherine, please, I don't want to lose everything. I'll start from scratch. I'll make it up to you. Don't be so cruel." I cut him off, my voice firm. "Stop acting. You're not crying out of remorse, you're crying for the luxurious life you've lost. If you don't sign now, I'll have to use the evidence of embezzlement. Then it won't be 12 years, but 20. At that, he stopped crying. He knew I wasn't bluffing. He took the pen and signed, his handwriting shaky and crooked, like his life. I took the papers. Our marriage ended with a signature in a cold visiting room. I stood up. "I hope that in your years of rehabilitation, you learn to be a decent human being. Goodbye forever." I turned my back on his weak, desperate screams. The iron door closed with a dull thud, separating 2 worlds, 2 destinies. I walked out into the bright, dazzling sunlight. At last, I was free. The trial was swift, thanks to the overwhelming evidence. Susan, as a cooperative witness, received a 2-year suspended sentence, but the price was high. Her pharmacist's license was permanently revoked, and she was fired from her job. From a life of success and luxury, she fell to unemployment and shame. She had to sell her condo and car to pay the fines. One night, I received a long message from her, full of apologies and laments. I read it without emotion and deleted it. Her regrets meant nothing to me. I chose to forget her like a speck of dust that irritates the eyes and then disappears. My mother-in-law didn't give up. She began to slander me, calling me a viper who had stolen everything from her son. I ignored her. One day, her lawyer came to my house demanding half of my assets. I calmly reminded him of the prenuptial agreement Michael had signed and the evidence of his embezzlement. I warned him that if he continued to harass me, I would sue him for defamation. The lawyer left with his tail between his legs. 6 months later, on a stormy night, I went into labor. At the hospital, as the pain tore through me, I remembered another day in those same corridors. That day had been one of terror and death. Today was a day of hope and life. After a difficult labor, the cry of my baby filled the room. "Congratulations. It's a girl, 7 pounds, and she's beautiful," said the midwife. They placed her on my chest. Tears of joy welled in my eyes. My daughter was here, safe and healthy. I named her Grace. A simple name that held all my wishes for her, a peaceful life. A thought chilled me. If it hadn't been for the morning sickness that day, this sacred moment would never have existed. Fate, sometimes cruel, sometimes miraculous, had taken one life to save another. On the day of the sentencing, I didn't go to court. I watched the news from home, with Grace in my arms. Michael was sentenced to 12 years in prison. On the screen, he looked like a broken man. I looked at him and felt nothing. No joy, no pity, just a great sense of relief. My past was closed with the judge's gavel. 2 years later, the company was thriving under my leadership. I was looking out at the city from my 20th floor office. Grace, now a 2-year-old whirlwind, ran into my arms. She was my engine, the cure for all my wounds. My phone buzzed. It was a message from Daniel Evans, a kind and respectful business partner who knew my story. "Hi, Catherine, it's Daniel. Would you and Grace like to go on a picnic this weekend? I know a beautiful spot in the countryside." I read the message and smiled. I looked at my daughter, playing happily. Happiness is not a destination, but a journey. I had suffered, but I hadn't let it close my heart. I replied, "Thank you, Daniel. We'd love to." I sent the message and hugged Grace. The sky was a deep blue, without a single cloud. The past had dissipated, giving way to the warm light of the present. After the storm, the sun always rises.